morning, Flipside. Happy Sunday. It is a beautiful, beautiful Sunday. Happy St. Patrick's Eve day. Wearing my green, so hands to yourself. It was also opening day for baseball, Little League, and our softball league. And, I've always wondered my whole life, who is tougher, boys or girls? Pregnancy is a big deal, right? Like that's you got that. But this weekend was the nail in the coffin because boys, right? I mean, boys, we saw the weather. I'm on the board for the Little League. We saw the weather, man. It was a crazy storm last week, right? We saw the weather Friday, oh yeah. Cancel the games, cancel opening day, cancel everything. And here's softball. Little weather, little water, that don't hurt. So Jana, Cody, the president, and her husband are right over there. Thank you guys so much for just your devotion to the softball league. My Pink Panthers, we came out yesterday. We lost like 12-0, but softball girls are tougher than boys. Go ahead and go clap for the girls. Winning's not everything. Winning, man, Billy, is not everything. I'm telling that to myself right now, all right, bro? Anyway, I hope you're having a great day. Happy Sunday. Pastor Karl is not here. He's also having a good day. He is up in Idaho right now. He is visiting his son. Him and Shelly are visiting their daughter-in-law, and they're also hanging out with the guy named Randy. If you don't know who Randy is their brand new grandson. So let's clap for Randy really quick. I'm in education, so every year I see all these brand new names of kids, right? Like Phoenix is one of these kids I have this year at my school. And Randy, I just gotta say, Randy is such a cute baby name. I gotta say, like, baby Randy. But Randy's one of those names, you don't see that often anymore. So anyway, when Pastor Karl and Shelly are back, make sure you go give them a hug and say congratulations. And ask them how Randy was doing. I'm sure they have good news. With that, Karl, he's not here. It's always an honor for me to step in, fill in for Pastor Karl. What a gifted teacher and preacher he is. And what an honor it is for me and my family to call this place our home church. And so thank you all for being part of this and part of this church. If you're newer here or new today, thanks for choosing this place rather than heading up the hill to the snow or going to run around on a nicely done softball field and playing. Thanks for choosing this place this morning. If you've been with us for some time, you would know that we've been walking through the book of Romans, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. Romans is a beautiful letter that was written by a guy named Paul to a church in Rome, an ancient church. The group of people that met at this church were a group of Jews and non-Jews, which the Bible refers to them as Gentiles, right? And we've been walking through, and it's been such a beautiful journey through the book of Romans. And today we land on Romans chapter 10. Now, before we jump in, I have to say that there's a word in Romans chapter 10 that is mentioned. This word or a form of this word is mentioned more in this one chapter than any other chapter in the New Testament. And so before we jump in, I just want to just talk about this one word, the word that's the Greek version right there. And in English, it's pronounced soteria, and it's a noun. And it means like a place of rescue or safety, physically or morally. It means to be like a place of deliverance or healthy, to be saved or saving. When we translate that Greek word to English, we often use the word salvation or to be saved. And these are a couple words that in church circles or like religious cultures, we hear these words a whole bunch. Like, hey, salvation is found in blah, 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 right? Or, hey, are you saved? I remember being in like 7th or 8th grade. My friend was like, hey, come to this little pizza thing in the cafeteria. And it was Athletes in Action, Christian group. They brought pizza to our school. And I got in there and I'm all like, walking in. And this big, the guy leading the thing, he walked up. And before I could even say, hey, where's the pizza? He said, hey, are you saved? And I'm like, save some pizza? Like, what are you talking about? And so I just want to like start today's talk with, these are some words: salvation, being saved, soteria, they're Christian words. We use these a lot in church. And so the question is, what are we being saved from? Or what is soteria? What are we being rescued from? Now, the book of Romans, it paints a pretty clear picture. In Romans chapter 3, Paul says that we all fall short. We all sin, it says. We all mess up. That guy, that girl, this guy, that dude, that girl way in the back. We all mess up. And then in Romans 6, Paul says, the wages of sin, what you deserve for sin is death. And so this idea of soteria, the reason why Romans 10 says it over and over again is because of this idea that, I'm not perfect. I mess up. I have sinned. How am I rescued from that? How am I rescued from death? Today we're going to answer a question. Paul will answer a question in Romans 10 that humans have been asking from the very beginning of time. Every human, every race, every culture, every religion seeks to answer one big question, and it is, how do I experience soteria? How am I saved? In the book of Acts, Paul, the writer of this letter, later is in prison. He's sitting in there in prison, and a soldier walks up to him and asks the very same question. Hey guys, how do I get saved? And we find that through this whole thing, you're saved. The wages of sin is death. In Romans 6, the wages of sin is death, but there is a gift of soteria, and it's found through Jesus. Now, we've named this whole series, the last few months we've been in Romans, we've named it grace. And then we have this mathematical symbol. Grace is greater than, and then fill in the blank. So like, grace is greater than your addiction, right? Grace is greater than your mindset. Grace is greater than sin. Grace is greater than depression. We have this slide that has all these different words. And the idea is that whatever is going on in your life, God's grace is greater than it. Let me tell you what grace is really quick. My dad's over there. He's the guy with the white hair. I got a good future coming. Thanks for coming, Dad. One time, me and my dad, we were at Woodward Park. Some of you guys know where Woodward Park is. It's a beautiful park right over there somewhere. We're riding our bikes like a father and son. It was cute, man. We were just, hey, Dad, we're loving life. It was a day like this. We set our bikes up against a tree, Laura. We were over here like doing dad and son stuff. We were just like, hey, let's skip rocks and teach me how to play catch and stuff. I was like an adult though. So it was more like, hey, Dad, how's politics? And while we were over here doing stuff, some high school kids stole our bikes. They just took off. And we came out and we're like, hey, what in the world? Where'd our bikes go? Oh my goodness, this is terrible. Let's go home, right? So we're getting in the car and all of a sudden here come these dudes riding our bikes. And there was 4 of them. One kid riding my bike with a kid on his handlebars. Another kid riding my dad's bike with a kid on his handlebars. And they're just like, whoa, what a great day this is. We just got some brand new bikes. And I'm like, hey, Dad, there goes our bikes. And he's like, let's go get them. I'm like, all right, man, now you're speaking. Let's go. Boom. It's not my style, though. I don't do that stuff. But that's what I was thinking. So here we go, an adult and his dad. We drive. We drive ahead of them. We drive a couple. We had this plan, Jenna. We drive ahead of them. We get out and we're hiding behind some trees. I'm like, dude, what are we doing, man? He's like, we're going to get our bikes. I'm like, all right, here we go. These guys, they had nothing. They had no clue. Man, they're riding our bikes up and all of a sudden we're just like, hey, one of them, boom, topples over. The kid goes flying, the other kid falls on the ground, and they're like, what? The other kid kicks the other guy off and is just pedaling, like trying to get out of there. I'm just like, hey, dude, that's my bike, and I get in front of him, and finally he stops. Mercy, okay, mercy. What they deserved was a little bit of, but that's not my style. So what they deserved was calling the police. And they probably deserved a talk and a ride in a police car. And probably a talking to. That's mercy. They didn't get that, though. They did not get that. So mercy is not getting what you deserve. But here's grace. My dad says, where you guys live? And they're like, we live, I don't know, you remember? Far away. We live by Bullard or something. And he's like, get in the car. We'll take you home. They get in the car. We're driving. We're talking with them. The dude I just was about to, and we're talking. We're hanging out. And my dad offers them a job. That's grace. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. Grace is getting something even though you don't deserve it. Grace is unmerited, unachieved, unearned gift. And so we've named this series, Grace is Greater Than Fill in the Blank. And my endeavor today is not to be flowery or engaging or funny. My task today is to be accurate. It's to be clear. Because the message today has eternal consequences. Because we're going to answer the question, how do I experience soteria? I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you my one line from the beginning. That way we're all clear. And I got to preface this. Every speech class, every sermon class I've either taken or given, we always learn this thing. Never, ever disrespect your audience in your intro. And I'm about to. Because here's my one point. Salvation, I'll let you actually read it. Soteria, read that first. It says salvation cannot be achieved. It can only be received. Because grace is greater than you. Grace is greater than anything you can do. Any money you got, any hair you got. Grace is greater than as much Sundays as you come to. Grace is greater than your work achievements, your effort. Grace is greater than anything you can conjure up to try to get soteria. Because salvation can't be achieved. It can only be received. And here's the question I want to just start with. Why is it that humans have such a hard time receiving something without feeling like, what do I have to do to get it? And let me just give you an example. Like, have you ever gotten a compliment and you think, like, how do I compliment them back? I mean, this happens to me all the hold on. That doesn't sound exactly right. But let me give you an example. When people compliment me, my first reaction and instinct is, okay, hey, Dave, nice shoes. Hey, Billy, nice. I like your shirt. Like, why is it that I can't just say thank you, right? A little while ago, my friend, he met me at Dutch Bros. He's like, hey, Dave, we need to get together. It was around Christmas time, and so I'm like, sure, let's get together tomorrow morning. I get to Dutch Bros a little bit early. That way I can buy my drink, so that's not awkward, like I have to buy his or anything, right? I'm getting there, I'm a little early. I'm sitting there drinking my drink, and he walks in, and this is how he walks in. He walks in like this. You know what the first thought was? Oh, I didn't bring a gift for him. Why he didn't tell me it was a gift exchange? Why didn't he tell me anything? And my first instinct was, okay, what in my car or my pocket can I give him? And he walked up and said, hey, Dave, hey, Merry Christmas, man. I was like, I can't receive that, man. Then I made up something like, I left your gift at home, you know? But why is it that humans feel like if you do something for me, then I have to do something for you? You scratch my back, then I get to scratch your back. You do me a favor, I owe you one. The point today is salvation can't be achieved. It can only be received because God's grace is greater than you. God's gift of grace can only be received. Today we're going to jump into Romans chapter 10. If you have a Bible or a smartphone, or if you just kind of want to follow along, you can go ahead and get there. And I'm just going to pray us in. Father, this morning, I pray, God, that you would be here with us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing these people into this space. Now, would you open our ears? Would you open our eyes to hear and see? And I'm even going to pray this, Father, that it would be so unique to second service, that it would be so unique to these people in this crowd, that you would speak loudly. I pray that I would hear you so clear, that we would hear you and see you this morning, especially me. Thank you for your book, Romans 10. Now lead us through it. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Amen. All right, so Paul, he's writing this letter to a church in Rome full of Jews and non-Jews, Gentiles, and he starts chapter 10 with this line. He says, in verse 1, it says this. He says, brothers and sisters, my heart's desire and prayer to God for the Israelites is that they may be saved. There's our first time. That they may experience soteria. He starts off with this thing, and real quick, pause. If anybody ever comes up to you and says, my heart's desire is this, you better lean in, because that is a very strong word choice. He says, my heart's desire and prayer is that these Israelites, these Jews, that they would be saved. And the question is, why is his heart's desire so into these Israelites? And the answer is because he is one. He is a Jew. He is an Israelite. In Galatians, he describes himself as a Hebrew of Hebrews, an Israelite, a Jew. And what he's saying is, these are my people. These are the kids I grew up with. This is my family. These are the kids I played in the sandlot with when I was in third grade. And it's my heart's desire and it's my prayer that they would receive Jesus, that they would be receiving soteria, salvation. Quick point. Paul is modeling something that so often we don't do. Because I believe that every single one of us in this place has heart's desires. I have heart's desires that my kids would be successful. I have heart's desires that the Pink Panthers would beat the Wolfpack next time. I have heart's desires that my family and my friends would grow to know Jesus more than just a character. I have a heart's desire that soteria would be a real thing, for the thing that I've experienced of Jesus' love and power would be experienced in my family and my friends and my coworkers. That's my heart's desire. But hope, Sanger says this, hope is not a strategy. Paul models something pretty cool. He says, my heart's desire is this, but his desires lead to prayers. Let me ask you this. What are your heart's desires? And are you praying for them? Or are you hoping it happens? Maybe it's a job, maybe it's financial, maybe it's for your kids, maybe it's for yourself, maybe it's for whoever. Do your heart's desires lead to prayer? I'm sure that every single one of you have somebody, something in your brain right now. And I encourage you to write it down. And then I encourage you to pray for that. Because hope is not a strategy, but potentially the most supernatural and powerful strategy we have access to is prayer. Paul says this. And then verse 2, he goes on, he says, for I can testify, so I can say that about them, that they are zealous for God. They are the Israelites. I can testify that they are zealous for God, but their zeal is not based on knowledge. Since they did not know the righteousness of God and sought to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. What he's saying is this. Hey guys, my heart's desire is that they would be saved because I know this. They are zealous. They are enthusiastic. They are so devoted to God and his things that it's crazy. They're so engulfed in the law. But man, they're missing the mark. They're a little bit misdirected. It's kind of like the old phrase, like they're barking up the wrong tree. And it's funny because when scholars read this and they make little notes about it, they say Paul is actually describing himself. In Galatians chapter 5, Paul describes himself as before he met Jesus. He says, I was a zealous, religious Hebrew. And then I experienced Jesus. Barking up the wrong tree is a reference to an old hunting phrase. They'd go raccoon hunting and they'd send the hounds out. And the dogs would go find a raccoon and they'd bark at it and the thing would run up a tree. And then they'd sit there and they'd bark up at the tree. Row, 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 row. And then the hunter would just walk up with his gun and he'd say, good dog. And then he'd point and shoot the raccoon. Barking up the wrong tree means this. Dog runs, barking up some tree. But the raccoon's over there. It's hanging out. And the hunter comes up and he says, what are you doing? What are you barking at, you dumb dog? There's nothing up here. Raccoon's over there just like, yeah, I tricked that dog. And what Paul is saying is, guys, I know these people. They're devoted to God. They're devoted to religion. They're devoted to the book. But they're missing the mark. And for a moment, I'm going to say something, and I might walk between the aisles and step on some toes right here. Because there are so many people, and I'm going to say this, there are many religious people that are so devoted to things that are not the main thing. There are so many people that are so engulfed in like, you gotta do a certain thing. You gotta be a certain way. You gotta go to church every Sunday. You gotta read every single day, man. And if you don't do that, they're devoted to the wrong things. They're missing the mark. And all those things are great. But some people are so devoted to missions. We gotta be involved with missions, but they forget about their own neighborhood. Some people are so involved with social justice, man. We gotta go, and they forget about the love and power of Jesus Christ. Some people they're so engulfed in a policy. We gotta vote for us. We gotta do this thing. We are so political, but they're missing something. Some people want someone, hey, can we teach you about the Bible, right? Like, some religions, they knock on your door. Some people are so yeah, you come in here, I'm gonna teach you a lesson. They're so convicted that I need to prove everybody wrong, but they forget to love them. And by the way, I'm all those people. I've been all of them. And what Paul is saying is there are people, these people, the Israelites, us sometimes, we're so devoted to the little things. Gotta wear this, gotta drink that, can't drink this, gotta do this, gotta do that they miss the main thing. Because salvation can't be earned, it can't be achieved, it can't be bought. Doesn't matter how much you pay, you tithe. I once met a guy who, a couple of years ago, we were meeting a little group, and he's like, he messed up, did something, his wife was mad at him. He's like, well, better tithe a little extra this weekend. And I thought, why is it so hard? Because I've been there too. Like, I forgot to read the Bible, man, God's a little upset. Like, why is it so hard that we feel like we got to earn it when really it's a gift? Salvation can't be achieved. It can only be received. Paul goes on in verse 4. He wraps this whole thing up. He says, Christ, Jesus, is the culmination of the law. Like that book, all those things you're doing, Israelites, Jesus is all of that. He says that it's the culmination of the law so that there may be righteousness for everyone who believes. And then he's going to quote Moses for a little bit. He's going to quote a law book. Those of you who consider yourself Bible scholars would know that Deuteronomy is part of the 5 books in the Old Testament called the Torah. And this is a literal law book that the Israelites lived by. And Paul is going to quote Moses. He says in verse 5, Moses writes about this, about the righteousness that people have by the law. So the person who does these things will live by them. But the righteousness that is by faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend to heaven? That is to bring Christ down. Who will descend to the deep? That is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? And then he's going to quote Moses. He says, but what does it say? The word is near you. It is in your mouth, and it is in your heart. It is in your mouth, and it is in your heart. In other words, Paul is saying, you don't have to go to great lengths to find or achieve salvation because it's already here. It's already here. And then here's the kicker. You ready for the kicker? Verse 9. Paul writes, if you declare with your mouth, Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Soteria. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. Soteria. There's a lot of things in life that are kind of gray, kind of in the middle, but this is pretty black and white. And there's no way I can make this more clear rather than just using what Paul said a long, long time ago. He said, if you believe in your heart and you profess or declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, you are saved. In other words, yes, we all fall short. Yeah, we all sin. Yeah, we've all messed up. Yeah, we all deserve death. But Romans 6 says, the wages of sin is death. But the gift of Jesus Christ is soteria, salvation, for those who believe and confess. I always wonder why Paul is so into this stuff, because that's who Paul was. I'm sure you've heard some people call lip service. Oh, they're a bunch of talk, man, but they don't follow it up. In Matthew, Jesus was speaking directly to a bunch of religious people, and he says, you guys honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. Jesus said, you honor God with your lips, but your heart is far from him. And what he's saying is, guys, right here, if you first start believing in your heart and then you profess it with your mouth, that's all you got to do. You don't got to get a gift and dance around it and shovel and figure out how I got to repay you. How can I earn this gift? He says, if you believe in your mouth, in your heart, declare with your mouth, you are saved. Because salvation cannot be achieved, can only be received. Because grace is greater than you. He follows this up with a pretty interesting phrase. He says in verse 11, he says, as scripture says, anyone who believes in him will never be put to shame. For there is no difference between Jew and Gentile. The same Lord is Lord of all and richly blesses all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. There's no difference. Some of us, man, we got to go to church every single Sunday and the rest of my life. We got to tithe 10%. Man, if we can push it to 15%, man, we got to dress a certain way. We got to act a certain way. We got to do There's no difference between the poor or the incredibly religious. What he's saying is, man, there's no difference between Jew and Gentile. There's no difference between black and white. There's no difference between tall and short. There's no difference between this religious person and the orphan girl who's just saying, Jesus, you're Lord. Because there's only one way to get it. You just receive it. Now, just a side note, interesting. When we say Jesus is Lord, some of us, we can kind of read that or say it kind of flippantly, like, yeah, that's kind of easy to say. Oh, yeah, Jesus is Lord. Yeah, so what? But to these people, remember, the Romans, the Jews in this church, to the Roman, it would have been saying, Jesus is Lord. He is the same as our emperor. It's crazy talk. I can get killed for saying that. For the Jew, it was saying Jesus is Lord, the same as Yahweh God from the Old Testament. You mean the God who created the earth? God of Abraham and Moses and David? I can get killed for saying that. I want you to know the heaviness of saying and believing Jesus is Lord. And for us, when we believe in our heart and say with our mouth that Jesus is Lord, what you're saying is Jesus is greater than my marriage. Jesus is greater than my family and my kids. I really want that promotion, but Jesus is Lord. He is in control. You're saying, God, Jesus is greater than my ambitions, my efforts, my dreams. When you truly believe Jesus is Lord, you're saying something inconceivable. Some of us gather here on a weekly basis. Some of you might be here for the very first time. Thank you for choosing this place. Some of you maybe grew up in a church tradition, or maybe you're kind of newer to this church thing. But it's not all the time that we truly get a moment to believe in our heart and confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord. And so I'd like to take a moment. Got this little thing in my pocket. It's a little communion cup. We're going to move into communion. I'm not fully done yet, so don't act like you're going home early. Billy's over here packing up his stuff. Sorry, Billy. If you don't have one of these, let me just explain this. There's nothing about this that is special. There's nothing about this that is saving. There's no soteria in doing this. I know different beliefs and different traditions. They're like the first communion is a big deal. Or I just gotta let you know, there's nothing about this that gets you anything. This is a symbol. This is it's a memento. It's going to remind us what does save us. And I have my friend back there. If you don't have one of these and you'd like to move forward, he has a bunch over there. I even have a couple over here. Go and just slip up your hand and you can get one of these if you'd like. But let's take a moment because Jesus himself was sitting at a table and he took a little piece of bread that we have as a little, like a wafer. And it says he broke it. And then he says, hey guys, this represents my body that I'm going to give to you. He says, every time you eat this, remember what I've done. And what he was saying is, I'm about to die on a cross so that you may live. If you believe with your heart that Jesus is Lord, if you believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, then let's eat together. And then the Bible says that in the same way, Jesus took a cup, and this morning we have a little grape juice that will be symbolic or represent what Jesus is about to say. But he said, he took a cup and he said, this is my blood. This is my blood that will be poured out for you. Because salvation cannot be achieved. There's nothing you can do. There's no dove you can kill. There's no amount of money you can pay. There's no amount of time you can serve to achieve this. He says, this is my blood poured out for you. And I'd like to take a moment to actually confess that if you do believe it. And I don't want to be cultish or anything. I don't want to sound all weird. But if you truly believe that Jesus is Lord, then I invite you to say that with me on 3. 1, 2, 3. Jesus is Lord. Let's drink together. That felt a little cultish, actually. We all did that. I'm like, what if someone's walking by? They're like, dang, that's a weird church. Now, I'm not done yet, so don't go anywhere. That's just the beginning, because Paul actually has a couple more things to say, actually, and they're very, very, very important. But first of all, let me say this. Some of you may have done that for the very first time in your life. Some of you may have done that for the 10th time or the 100th time. Or maybe you stumbled into it and you're like, actually, yeah, I'm going to do this today. I believe there's a party in heaven right now, right this moment, that's saying, praise God, there are people who are receiving the gift of soteria. The tendency will be then, okay, now what do I got to do? Now what? Now what do I got to do? But I want you to know, man, according to this, it's been received. Now, I will also add that it's not a one-time thing, usually. Some of y'all, in 1998, when I was at camp at this night, I said this thing. And that's cool. I love that. That's beautiful. But I also believe that this is a lifestyle, that this is a way of being, that every step I take, I'm breathing in Jesus is Lord, and everything I say is saying Jesus is Lord, even when it doesn't sound like that. And we can spend another 3 hours talking about what does it mean to profess Jesus is Lord. Tim and I had a good conversation the other day. And Dylan, what does it mean? We'll get into that later. But let's first finish. Because now Paul has a couple of questions. He has questions for those of you who did this. In verse, 14, I think. Yep, 14, he says, question time. How then can they, Israelites, or those people you have in mind, how can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? And then he says, as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. In other words, what he's saying is, how are people supposed to believe or profess anything if they haven't heard it? And how are they supposed to hear it unless someone else believes it and says it? And then he says, how beautiful are the feet. And he's quoting Isaiah, a book in the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament, Sophia, there were these cities and they didn't have cell phones. They couldn't call the battlefield and be like, hey, how are the troops doing? They would have a watchman and he'd be at the city gate, usually in like a little tower. I'm not going to stand on that, but he'd be up and he'd just be kind of looking around and he'd be waiting and watching for the messenger. Because there was some guy, potentially a girl, because girls are tougher, and the guy would be his only role would be to run to another kingdom or wherever the battle was. He'd run, sometimes for miles, and he'd get the news. Okay, and he'd run back, and the watchman would be like, oh, there he is. There's the messenger. And the watchman would go down, and he'd go see the messenger, and the messenger would run up and say, oh, the battle has been won. We won the battle. And the watchman would be like, that's great news. Hey, everybody, the battle has been won. And he'd look back and he says, your feet are beautiful. The dude just ran 70 miles. His feet are not beautiful. They look like crazy people feet. But what he's saying is, man, you brought the best news I could hear. The way you did it was beautiful. But how can people hear if no one says it? And how do people believe if no one brings the news? The last words on earth that Jesus said before he ascended, rose to heaven, was this. He was speaking to a group of people, much like yourself, who believed that Jesus was Lord. And he told them, go. In Matthew 28, go and make disciples, baptize them, teach them the good news of soteria. And I want to say this. It's not just Karl's job. It's not just for a Sunday. You don't have to have a little cute mic and be up on a stage to say it. You don't have to have a degree. Jesus wasn't like, let me see your theology degree. Let me see what seminary you went to. No, he said, do you believe? Go. Doesn't have to be the way that everyone else does it. It's your way. Jesus is Lord. Do you believe that? Then declare it. Do you guys see the cycle? There's a cycle. No one can believe unless someone else believes and declares it. And no one can hear it unless someone says it out loud. And then once they say it out loud, they have the option to believe or not believe. But once they believe, then they say it. And someone else will believe. And someone else will say it. And then someone else will believe. And do you guys see the cycle happening over and over? Jack, let me make this point. God could have done anything to bring people to Jesus. He could have put a big old fluffy angel right here. And the angel, I guarantee you guys have been like, dang, what do you got to say? I want to hear what you have to say Jesus is Lord, but instead he has me today. He could have, like the Old Testament, wrote on the wall, hey, Jesus is Lord. I guarantee we would have been like, whoa, okay, I believe now. Instead, you got me. God could have done anything. He could make this little chair spin if he wanted to. And then I'd be like, see, you believe? He could have done that, but he didn't. God's normal way to bring people to Jesus' love and his power is through lumps of clay, Romans 9 says. God's normal way to spread the kingdom, the good news that salvation can't be earned or achieved, is through people like you and people like me. Don't ever think that you don't have what it takes. The Bible is black and white how to reach soteria, and then it's black and white what you're supposed to do after it. A friend of mine has a church in Fresno. His name is Rini. Pastor Rini. I have some family that goes there, and he's a buddy of mine. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Valley Christian Center. You guys have, right? Nowadays, they have this sign as you're leaving the parking lot of this church. They have this sign, and I just liked it. I didn't have a chance to make a fancy one, but I went ahead and wrote it on my computer, and it says, they have this sign at the church that says this now. It says, you are now entering the mission field. And I love that idea. It's not just the pastor's job. It's not just the dude who went to Fullerton or the theological cemetery or seminary. It's an old pastor joke there. It's not just the guy who gets up in front because he's brave enough. It's all of us. Sarah, can you do me a favor? Can you go put this on the wall over there? Here's a little couple tacks. Just put it right next to the wall on your way out. That way we'll see it. Just for today, we'll have it there. You can do it now. You're not going to miss nothing. Salvation cannot be achieved. No amount of money, no amount of time you serve, no matter what you do, you have to humble yourself and just receive it. Paul ends this part. Paul ends chapter 10 with something very, very, very sad. He's quoting Isaiah. He's quoting it. And then he comes to this in verse 21. Paul is quoting Isaiah in the Old Testament. Isaiah was quoting God, speaking to the Israelites. Let's receive this today as a warning, because Paul ends like this. He says, but concerning Israel, but concerning the Jews, he says, all day long I have held out my hands to a disobedient and obstinate people. In other words, he's saying, there is always going to be people who don't know how to receive the gift. And they will be disobedient, and they will be stubborn, and they will do their little things. They will try and try and try, but here's God saying, all day long, I hold my hands out to a disobedient people, to a stubborn people. See, humans, we have this wire in us that says, I can't just receive it without doing something. Guys, today, let's not complicate the good news that salvation cannot be achieved. It can only be received. Because when you get the gift, decide to open it, you're going to find a key. And Jesus says that I am the door. I am the gate. Nobody gets to the Father except through me. Salvation cannot be achieved. You can't rub the door. You can't dance for the door. You can't give to the door. But you can believe in your heart, and you can confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. And that door, what Jesus says is, man, soteria. Soteria. Yes, the wages of sin is death. Yes, you've messed up a bunch. Yes. Can you accept the gift? This morning, I'm gonna close up right now. But I want to turn your attention to something really quick. In front of your table, not your table, but in front of you, there's a chair. And in that chair, there's a little welcome card and decide, serve, connect. This is not just for new people, by the way. This is for everybody. On the back of it, it says info card. And then it has some little options here. And I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to encourage every single one of you today. Some of you, because there's a couple of different types of people in this room right now. There's some of you that said, yeah, I followed Jesus. I've decided to follow him for a long time. And today, I'm doing it again. Good. Praise God. There's some of you that may have done that for the first time. Or maybe there was a time where Jesus was not Lord. And then today you're like, okay, Jesus is Lord. I'm going to believe it. I'm going to say it. If that's you, just tell me. I've decided to follow Jesus. Even if you've already done it. Tell me. Tell us. We love to serve with you, alongside you. We'd want to walk with you. There's another group of you that may have been a little bit more encouraged today. Or maybe inspired. Maybe there's someone that when your heart's desires turned to prayer, maybe someone stuck out. Like you're thinking of that son of yours, or maybe that coworker. I encourage you to write their name down right here. Write it down. We want to join you in the mission field. And then there's some of us here that are still thinking, and I'm going to be honest and blunt about it. Some of us are still like, it's too easy. Can't be that easy. What do I have to do? Wherever you're at, we'd like to know about it. I encourage you to fill this out. Give it to me, give it to Jeff, give it to Heather, drop it in that box over there. We want to join you as you move forward. Because salvation is a pretty big deal. And it can't be achieved. It can only be received. Because God's grace is greater than you. May you, my friends, may you come to believe that Jesus is Lord of your life. Truly believe it. May you, my brothers and my sisters, may you declare it, profess it to your kids, to your wife, to your husband, to your family, to your coworkers. And may you see soteria, not only in your life, but the lives around you. Because salvation can't be received. Can't be achieved. It can only be received. We have one last little song, and it's called This Is Amazing Grace. And we call it Amazing Grace because undeserved merit is pretty amazing. Doesn't make sense for us humans. That's why we call it Amazing Grace. Feel free to stay sitting, fill out the card, feel free to stand, but let's finish today with a little bit of singing.